Before we get started, hit the comments and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is over there. Whether you're catching sunrise in Nairobi, burning midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to hear from you. Don't just watch silently, let me know where in the world you are. Now let's dive into the story. The first thing people noticed was the sound. Not shouting. Not sirens. The sound of glass trembling in its frame. The automatic doors of St. Hilaire Medical Center bowed inward like they were afraid. Nurses froze mid-step. A child began to cry somewhere behind the intake desk. And then he came through, 7 feet of raw panic and muscle, shoulders scraping the metal frame, eyes wide and wild like an animal cornered by fire. His hospital bracelet had snapped. Blood smeared his forearm in dark streaks. The waiting room shrank around him. Mireya Holt stood behind the triage desk, hands shaking inside cheap blue gloves. 23 years old. 3 weeks into her first real job. Rookie nurse. Her badge still too clean. Her scrubs still stiff. She felt small, smaller than she'd ever felt in her life, as the giant's shadow swallowed the floor at her feet. "Don't touch me," the man roared, voice cracking like a splitting beam. "I said don't touch me." Security was late. They were always late. One guard hovered near the wall, pale and useless, hand frozen above his radio. The giant kicked over a plastic chair. It skidded and shattered against the vending machine. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Someone screamed. Someone prayed. Mireya's heart slammed so hard she tasted copper. The man lunged toward the desk. Instinct said run. Training said freeze. Fear said you are about to die. But something else, older, buried deep, rose up in her chest. Mireya stepped forward. Her voice surprised even her. "Come. Flat. Controlled." "Sir," she said, meeting his eyes. "You're bleeding. You need to stop." The giant laughed, a broken sound. "You think you can stop me?" He slammed his fist into the counter inches from her face. Pens jumped. A computer monitor toppled. "I could fold you in half." She saw it then. Not just his size, but his imbalance. The way his weight leaned forward. The way his breath hitched. The way his eyes flicked, searching for exits. He wasn't hunting. He was trapped. A memory flashed, boots on gravel, rain on her eyelashes, a voice barking commands she'd never forget. Asterisk balance is a lie. Take it and the giant falls. Asterisk. Her hands stopped shaking. Mireya stepped around the desk, slow, deliberate, placing herself directly in his path. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone whispered her name like a warning. The giant blinked, confused now, anger flickering into uncertainty. "What are you doing?" he snarled. She raised her hands, not in surrender but in placement. "I'm helping you," she said. Then he grabbed her wrist. It was like being caught by a steel cable. Pain shot up her arm. The room erupted, shouts, footsteps, chaos. The guard finally moved. Too slow. Mireya didn't pull away. She stepped in. Her foot slid behind his heel. Her hips turned. Her shoulder dropped under his center of gravity, exactly where the memory told her to go. The world narrowed to angles and breath and leverage. The giant's eyes widened. What? The floor came up fast. 7 feet of fury left his feet and crashed down, the impact shaking the room. The sound was thunder. Silence followed, thick, stunned, impossible. Mireya stood over him, chest heaving, one knee pressed into his shoulder, his massive arm locked tight against her body. A military restraint. Cling. Controlled. Final. No one moved. No one breathed. And as security finally rushed in, Mireya realized something terrifying. This wasn't the first time she'd taken down someone bigger than her. And the reason why was a secret that could ruin her life. The first time Mireya Holt learned how to bring down a giant, she was 17 years old and standing in the rain. The memory came back to her in sharp flashes as security cuffed the fallen man and dragged him away. Her hands still tingled. Her knees ached from the impact. Someone guided her to a chair, but she barely felt herself sit. The ER lights buzzed overhead, too bright, too white, too clean for what her body remembered. Rain. Mud. Gravel biting into skin. Back then she hadn't been a nurse. She hadn't been anyone important at all. Just a skinny girl with bruised ribs and a backpack that never felt heavy enough to justify the weight inside her chest. She grew up in Red Hollow, a forgotten military town pressed against the edge of the desert. Everything there smelled like dust and diesel. Soldiers came and went. Promises did the same. Her mother worked 2 jobs. Her father disappeared when Mireya was 9, leaving behind a folded flag he never earned and a silence that never healed. Trouble found Mireya early. Not because she looked for it, but because she was small, quiet, and learned too young that help rarely arrived on time. The night everything changed, 3 boys cornered her behind a closed gas station. One laughed. One blocked the road. The third grabbed her wrist hard like ownership. She remembered freezing. Remembered the sound of her own breath getting thin. And then a voice cut through the dark. Let her go. Captain Rowan Cade stepped out of the shadows like he belonged there. Tall. Come. Military posture carved into his bones. The boys scattered like roaches, leaving Mireia shaking under the flickering light. He didn't touch her. Didn't crowd her. Just handed her a bottle of water and waited until her breathing slowed. You freeze, he said gently. That's not weakness. It's instinct. But instinct can be trained. She never planned to see him again. But Red Hollow had a way of looping lives together. Weeks later, he found her again, this time watching from the edge of a public training field where recruits practiced hand-to-hand drills. You want to feel safe? He asked, eyes steady. Or you want to be safe? Training with Captain Cade was brutal. No yelling. No ego. Just repetition until muscles learned what fear tried to erase. He taught her leverage over strength. Balance over size. Calm over panic. He taught her that giants fell fastest when they believed themselves untouchable. Never fight anger with anger, he told her one evening as the sun bled red across the sand. Use their weight, their certainty. Take what they give you. She trained in secret. Early mornings. Late nights. Bruises hidden under sleeves. Her mother thought she worked extra shifts. Mireia let her believe it. Some truths were too heavy to share. Then Captain Cade deployed overseas. He left her with a final lesson and a folded note she kept in her wallet to this day. If the moment comes, it read, trust your feet before your fear. Years passed. Mireia clawed her way through school, through exhaustion, through doubt. Nursing wasn't a dream, it was a decision. If help rarely arrived, she would become help. If chaos came, she would stand where others stepped back. The ER pager buzzed, snapping her back to the present. Mireia, her charge nurse asked softly. Not accusing. Just concerned. Are you okay? Mireia nodded, though her throat burned. Around them, the hospital slowly breathed again. Chairs were set upright. A child stopped crying. Life pretended nothing had happened. But Mireia knew better. Because as the giant was wheeled away, still groaning, still restrained, she caught the look in his eyes. Not anger. Recognition. And deep down, a cold thought crept in. This wasn't over. The past she thought she'd outrun had just found her again. And it was bigger than ever. By morning, the story had already changed. In the break room, it was a joke. In the hallways, it was a rumor. By the time Mireia clocked back in that night, she had become something else entirely. A headline whispered between nurses, a shaky phone video passed around with wide eyes and nervous laughs. Did you see the rookie? She dropped him like he was nothing. Asterisk 7 feet. I swear to God. Asterisk. Mireia kept her head down. She washed her hands longer than necessary. She double-checked charts she already knew by heart. The ER smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee, the usual rhythm trying to stitch itself back together. But she felt exposed, like a door had been left open inside her. The giant's name was Calder Voss. She learned it from the intake report she wasn't supposed to read. 34 years old. Construction foreman. History of traumatic brain injury. Recently discharged from a pain clinic. High doses. Missed follow-ups. The kind of patient who fell through cracks until the cracks swallowed him whole. He was still unconscious upstairs. And he had asked for her. The request came quietly. Too quietly. A nurse leaned in and whispered it like bad news. He woke up. He keeps asking about the small one. The nurse who put him down. Mireia's stomach tightened. She told herself it meant nothing. Confusion after sedation. Displaced anger. But the memory of his eyes, clear, sharp, suddenly aware, would not let her lie to herself. In room 412 the air felt heavier. Calder lay restrained, massive wrists cuffed to the bed, chest rising slow and deep. His face was calmer now, almost gentle, if you ignored the bruises forming along his jaw. When his eyes opened and found her, something flickered there. Respect. You learned that somewhere, he said, voice hoarse. Mireia didn't answer. She checked vitals. Adjusted the 4. Kept her movements precise, professional, distant. You didn't panic, Calder continued. Everyone else did. But you didn't. She met his gaze then. You were going to hurt someone. His mouth twitched. Not a smile. Something sadder. I already did. Silence settled between them. Machines beeped softly, steady as a heartbeat. Calder swallowed, eyes drifting to the ceiling. They trained you military, he said. Not a question. Maria's pulse jumped. I'm a nurse. That's not what I asked. She finished her checks and stepped back. Rest. You're safe here. As she turned to leave, his voice dropped low. The man who taught you, did he wear desert camo? Her breath caught. Mireya left the room without answering, her hands trembling for the first time since the takedown. That night, she dreamed of Captain Rowan Cade for the first time in years. Not the calm instructor. Not the steady voice. But the last image she had of him, standing beside a transport truck, dust swirling around his boots, eyes lingering like he wanted to say something he couldn't afford to. She woke to her phone vibrating. An unknown number. You did exactly what he taught you, the message read. Some lessons don't stay buried. Her chest tightened. She typed back with shaking thumbs. Who is this? The reply came instantly. Someone who knew him. And someone who knows why Calder Voss lost control. Mireya sat up in bed, heart pounding. Because Captain Cade had taught her how to survive. But he had also warned her, once quietly, that some techniques came with shadows. And now those shadows were stepping into the light. The hospital felt smaller at night, corridors echoing with soft wheezes and the distant hum of monitors. Mireya moved from room to room, her mind replaying the brief conversation with Calder. Every word he said tugged at threads she had long tried to hide. He wasn't just a giant. He was a storm, and she was beginning to understand that storms rarely arrive alone. After her shift ended, she walked through the empty parking lot, cold wind biting at her scrubs. The city beyond the hospital seemed quiet, but she could feel it waiting, watching, pressing down with the weight of history. Her phone buzzed again, another message from the unknown number. Asterisk Calder isn't the first. He won't be the last. You need to remember where you came from. Asterisk. Mireya's hands tightened around her phone. She thought of Red Hollow, dusty streets, distant sunsets, and Captain Cade's voice cutting through her fears. That place was supposed to be gone. Out of reach. But the past had a way of tracking footprints, and hers had left a trail. Her thoughts turned to her mother. Always worried, always tired, unaware of the discipline and secrets Mireya carried beneath her calm exterior. She had learned early that survival required more than courage. It required preparation, precision, and the ability to make impossible choices. A flash of memory hit her, training in the desert at dawn, sand grinding into her palms, muscles screaming, Captain Cade correcting her stance again and again. Control fear before it controls you, he said. And understand this, giants fall for the smallest reasons. Now, facing Calder, she realized he wasn't just a patient. He was a puzzle piece of a much larger picture she hadn't yet seen. And someone watching her through the messages, knew the connection, knew the past that had trained her hands and her instincts. The next morning she returned to the ER with a new awareness. Every glance, every shadow felt loaded. Nurses whispered about Calder, but she barely heard them. Her attention was elsewhere, on the threads connecting Red Hollow, Captain Cade, and this storm of a man who had walked into her life at 7 feet tall. In room 412, Calder stirred. His eyes found hers immediately. No anger this time. Only recognition. Something unspoken lingered in the space between them, heavy and expectant. You can't ignore this, he said softly. I didn't come alone. Mireya froze. Every training session, every calculated move she had practiced in secret, screamed that the next hours would demand more than skill. They would demand courage she hadn't yet tested in full. Her heartbeat matched the monitor's rhythmic beeps as she nodded. Then tell me, she said. Tell me everything. For the first time, Calder spoke of the pressure, the injuries, the manipulation that had pushed him beyond reason. And as his story unfolded, Mireya understood something chilling. The ER incident wasn't random. It was the opening move in a game far larger than herself, a game in which she had already been cast as both protector and pawn. Outside the window, the city hummed quietly, unaware. Inside, the storm was gathering, and Mireya realized she would have to confront more than a giant. She would have to face every ghost from the life she thought she had left behind. The ER had settled into its false rhythm. Machines beeped, footsteps echoed, and the faint scent of antiseptic lingered like a lie. But Mireya knew the calm was temporary. Giants, literal or metaphorical, rarely stormed only once. She sat at the nurse's station, charting patients she barely saw, her mind elsewhere. Calder Voss was upstairs, restrained but awake, his eyes following her every move. He didn't speak much, but when he did, it was calculated, probing. She recognized that instinct immediately. He was testing boundaries, and every subtle shift revealed his intelligence, his cunning. Then came the first sign that this storm wasn't isolated. A call from intake, another patient, similar size, erratic behavior, bloodied clothing. The description hit Mireia like a hammer. 7-foot frame. Shaking fists. Eyes wild. Same pattern. Same danger. Her chest tightened. She remembered Captain Cade's words. Giants fall for the smallest reason, but storms rarely come alone. That memory became a blade in her mind. Training had taught her to move before the threat materialized, to anticipate leverage and imbalance. Now she would need to apply it in real life with stakes higher than any drill or simulation. Mireia moved to room 412, approaching Calder cautiously. He didn't look at her with anger this time. His gaze was sharper, almost admiring. "You're ready?" he said softly. "I can feel it in your stance." She froze. "Ready for what?" "To control the storm." Her pulse accelerated. His words were half warning, half promise. Outside, sirens announced the incoming patient. The chaos was coming faster than she could measure. This was no longer about skill. It was about instinct, courage, and endurance. Mireia closed her eyes briefly and remembered the desert mornings, sand in her eyes, Rowan Cade correcting her stance until it became second nature. She felt the rhythm return, the precise balance of leverage, the alignment of body and mind. Fear existed but did not command. As the new patient was wheeled in, chaos erupted. Chairs toppled. Screams pierced the sterile walls. Security rushed in, but Mireia stepped forward. Her hands rose, calm, deliberate. Every movement measured. The giant lunged before she fully reached him. Time slowed. She dropped her weight slightly, pivoted her hip under his, and locked his arm against her side. The world narrowed, breath, balance, leverage. He crashed to the floor with a force that shook the linoleum tiles. Every nurse froze. Security stopped mid-step. And Mireia remained standing, heart hammering but composed, her eyes scanning for the next threat. Calder, restrained upstairs, whispered something she barely heard. "You've learned well, but this is only the beginning." Mireia knew he was right. The storm was far from over. And now she faced more than one giant. Outside the hospital, the wind picked up, rattling windows. Inside, Mireia braced herself. The next hours would test everything she had learned. Every skill, every memory, every quiet lesson from Red Hollow and Captain Cade. The battle wasn't just physical. It was mental, emotional, and moral. Every patient, every bystander, every restrained giant was part of a chain she would have to break, or someone would pay the price. As the alarms blared again, she felt a cold certainty settle over her. The ER would never be the same. And neither would she. The ER had become a battlefield. Fluorescent lights flickered over overturned gurneys, scattered charts, and broken equipment. Nurses huddled in corners, trembling, while security tried to contain the chaos. And through it all, Mireia moved like a calm eye in a storm, focused, precise, aware. She had no time to think about fear. The second giant, the one described in intake, was larger, angrier, and faster than Calder. He tore through the waiting room like a freight train, knocking chairs and carts aside. Screams echoed against the walls. Every person in the room froze, paralyzed by panic. Mireia's mind, however, ran in patterns learned long ago. She remembered the desert drills, Captain Cade's voice cutting through wind and sand. Asterisk, use their momentum. Lead the force where you need it to go. Asterisk, the giant swung his massive arm toward a nurse crouched by the triage desk. Without hesitation, Mireia stepped forward, positioning herself at the angle of his attack. She grabbed his wrist mid-swing, spun under his elbow, and applied the exact leverage Cade had drilled into her muscle memory. The man stumbled off balance and crashed to the floor. The sound was bone-shattering. His roar filled the room, raw and terrified. Yet Mireia remained standing, unshaken, her hands steady, her breathing controlled. She turned just in time to see Calder, now awake, watching from room 412. His eyes held something she hadn't expected. Approval, respect, a silent acknowledgement that she was no longer a rookie. But the moment of triumph was brief. Another alarm blared, code blue. A patient in critical condition. Amid the chaos, Mireia's instincts split her focus. One giant down, another potentially en route, lives at risk. The ER had become a battlefield in every sense. Strategy, precision, and survival intertwined. She moved between injured patients, instructing staff, stabilizing vitals, all while keeping her senses trained on the giant's movements. Every step, every gesture was measured. She was no longer reacting, she was orchestrating, anticipating, controlling. Amid the chaos, Calder spoke again, voice low through the open door. "You've mastered fear, but can you handle responsibility?" Mireya's pulse quickened. Responsibility meant more than keeping herself alive. It meant controlling the giants, protecting innocence, making split-second decisions that could save or end lives. Every lesson from Red Hollow, every training session with Cade, every sacrifice she had endured led to this point. As the new giant lurched toward her, she remembered one final lesson. Giants may tower above, but the ground is your ally. She dropped her weight, anchored her stance, and prepared to redirect the force of the storm. The battle wasn't over. It was only intensifying. And in that moment, Mireya realized something powerful. She was no longer the rookie. She was the force the storm hadn't anticipated. The ER trembled beneath the weight of human chaos, but one woman stood unshakable. And the giants, both literal and figurative, were about to learn the cost of underestimating her. The ER had transformed into a war zone. Monitors beeped frantically, alarms shrieked, and the scent of antiseptic mixed with fear. Blood streaked the floor, but Mireya's focus was razor-sharp. Every motion, every angle, every step was calculated. She had no choice but to be perfect. The second giant roared, his massive frame barreling toward the triage desk. Chairs toppled, glass shattered, and the sound of his boots striking linoleum was like a drum signaling doom. Mireya's heart pounded, but she didn't flinch. She remembered Cade's desert drills. Move first, react second. Make them fall into your plan. She intercepted him mid-stride. His hands wrapped around her arms, steel grip strength that would crush most people. She countered instinct with training, pivoted her hips, dropped her center of gravity, and twisted under his weight. The giant stumbled, his balance undone, the ground rushing up to meet him. A scream cut through the chaos, a child's cry. Mireya's eyes snapped toward the corner of the room. A young boy clung to his mother, frozen with terror. She barked a command, "Stay low. Cover your head." The mother obeyed, eyes wide, gripping the child, and Mireya returned to her opponent. The fight was almost a dance, a terrifying high-stakes ballet. Sweat stung her eyes. Her knees burned. Every muscle in her body screamed. Yet she was calm, focused, relentless. The giant lunged again. She sidestepped, swept his legs, and pinned him against the floor. From room 412, Calder watched. He had regained some control over himself, yet his eyes never left Mireya. Something passed between them, a silent acknowledgement. He had seen what she could do, and even he, massive and furious, knew she had become something extraordinary. But the battle wasn't just physical. Emotions surged, fear, adrenaline, anger, and the memory of every time she had been underestimated, dismissed, or left to survive alone. The ER was a crucible, forging courage from chaos, shaping resolve from terror. A sudden crash, a monitor falling, a chair splitting, made the second giant roar again, momentarily unbalancing him. Mireya seized the chance. Leveraging every ounce of weight, precision, and instinct, she rolled him, locked his arms, and applied a military restraint learned years ago in Red Hollow's desert sands. The roar died to a low, stunned groan. Around her, the ER finally exhaled. Nurses and staff stepped forward cautiously, the tension slowly ebbing, leaving behind awe and disbelief. The second giant was down, immobilized, his fury neutralized by nothing more than strategy, calm, and an unshakable will. Mireya stood, chest heaving, sweat dripping, eyes scanning the room. She had survived the impossible. Protected the innocent. Taken down not one but two giants. And in the quiet aftermath, she realized something essential. This wasn't just a fight. This was proof of what she had always known. Her courage, her skill, and her heart could move mountains. Then Calder's voice came, steady and low. "You were always meant to do this." Mireya's pulse slowed. The storm had broken. But as she looked around at the destruction and the frightened faces, she understood one thing clearly. This victory came at a cost, and the cost would follow her far beyond the ER. The ER was quiet now, but the silence was brittle. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered in overturned carts, broken chairs, and the trembling hands of the staff. Mireya moved deliberately, checking on patients, speaking softly, her voice a steadying anchor in a sea of shock. Calder was restrained but calm, sitting on the edge of his bed in room 412. His eyes followed her, sharp and assessing. "You're different from anyone I've met," he said quietly, voice tinged with both respect and something heavier. "You see fear and turn it into this." He gestured at the ER. "How?" Mireya took a breath, glancing at the monitors, at the scared nurses, at the young child clinging to his mother in the corner. "Training," she said simply. But it was more than that. It was instinct, memory, and something she had buried deep. The weight of survival, the lessons from Red Hollow, and the guidance of a man who believed she could be stronger than fear itself. A knock came at the door. Security stepped in tense. Behind them, a third figure lingered. A man in plain clothes, calm, yet carrying the authority of someone who had seen more than his share of chaos. His gaze fell on Calder, then Mireia. "He isn't acting alone," the man said. "And you, Mireia Holt, you're now part of a story that's bigger than any one ER." Her pulse jumped. Part of what story? The man hesitated as though measuring her readiness. "Giants aren't random," he said. "They're being guided. And someone is testing you. Watching you. Seeing how you react under pressure." Mireia's stomach tightened. The messages, the shadows, Calder's sudden insight, it all clicked. The storm wasn't just chaos. It was a trial. And she had passed the first rounds. But the game wasn't over. Not yet. Calder's eyes softened. "I lost control," he admitted, voice low. "But not everyone else will. If you think this ends with us in this room, you're wrong." Mireia nodded slowly, understanding the weight of responsibility. Every decision she had made tonight, every move she had executed, had consequences far beyond the ER walls. People had survived because of her, but threats still lurked. Shadows she couldn't yet see fully. She returned to the nurse's station, her mind calculating, planning, preparing. She knew the next storm would be sharper, faster, and more dangerous. She had learned the cost of underestimating giants, and of being underestimated herself. And as she checked the final charts and reassured frightened staff, she felt a quiet fire ignite within her. She was no longer a rookie. She was a protector, a strategist, a force that had already changed lives tonight. But deep down, a thought lingered, a reminder from the desert sands, from Captain Cade's lessons. Asterisk, every victory reveals the next challenge. Every calm is only temporary. Asterisk. Outside the ER, the city slept. Inside, Mireia stood ready. The shadows and the light were closing in, but she would face them. She had no other choice. The ER was no longer recognizable. Chairs lay in splinters. Monitors blinked erratically. Broken glass glinted like shards of a storm frozen in time. The night had become a battlefield, and Mireia Holt was at its center. The third giant arrived. Bigger, faster, more deliberate. Unlike Calder or the second man, this one wasn't wild with panic. He was calculating. Every step was measured, every movement precise, like a predator testing its prey. Staff scattered, shrieking. Security tried to intercept him, but he sidestepped effortlessly, his bulk barreling through the corridor. Mireia steadied herself. She remembered every lesson: balance over brute force, leverage over strength, calm over chaos. Sweat burned her eyes, but she saw the angles, the weight distribution, the tiniest shift that could topple him. He lunged at her. Time slowed. She sidestepped, pivoted, and dropped under his center of gravity, locking his massive arms against her torso. The force of his weight slammed down, sending a shockwave through the floor. She twisted, applying every ounce of precision she'd practiced for years. A sudden shout from behind, a nurse trapped in a corner. Mireia's head snapped. The giant's grip loosened for a moment. She seized it, delivering a controlled sweep, sending him crashing into a gurney with a sickening crunch. But Calder, restrained but awake, spoke from room 412. "Mireia, you can't hold him alone." Her mind raced. She wasn't just facing strength, she was facing tactics. The giants were coordinated, their chaos methodical. And in that moment, she understood the true nature of the storm. This was a test of every skill, every instinct, every lesson from Red Hollow and Captain Cade. The final strike became a blur of motion. Pivot, leverage, restraint. The giant's momentum carried him forward, then down until he lay immobilized, defeated not by raw power, but by strategy, control, and relentless courage. Silence followed. Breathing was heavy, uneven. The staff stared in awe. Calder's eyes softened, respect evident. You did it," he whispered. "You're beyond what anyone expected." Mireia dropped to her knees, exhausted, trembling from adrenaline. The ER was in ruins, but she had survived. She had protected lives. She had taken down not one but 3 giants, each more dangerous than the last. And in doing so she had faced herself, the fear, the doubt, the memories she thought she'd buried. Outside, sirens approached. Authorities, paramedics, backup. Inside, the survivors slowly emerged from hiding, eyes wide, hearts racing. And in the quiet aftermath, Mireia realized something profound. She was no longer a rookie. She was a force of nature, tempered in chaos, capable of feats no one had imagined possible. Calder, finally restrained fully, met her gaze one last time. "The world underestimates you," he said quietly. "But never let them. You're unstoppable." Mireia nodded, letting the weight of exhaustion and relief wash over her. Tonight had been a crucible, a test, and she had emerged stronger than ever. She had faced literal giants, and the emotional ones lurking in her past, and survived. The storm had broken. The year was scarred, but life continued. And Mireia Holt had changed everything. The first rays of sunlight slipped through the windows, painting the destruction in gold. Broken chairs and toppled equipment cast long shadows, but the air felt lighter now, charged with the quiet relief of survival. The night had been a storm, but storms pass, and they leave clarity behind. Mireia moved slowly, checking on the last of the patients. Nurses and staff whispered her name with awe, some shaking, some tearful, all profoundly grateful. She had been the calm center in a chaos that could have swallowed the entire hospital. And now, in the pale morning light, the gravity of what she had accomplished began to settle in her chest. Calder Voss was finally fully restrained and prepped for transfer. He looked at her, a hint of genuine respect in his eyes. "You didn't just stop me," he admitted quietly. "You stopped all of this before it could spiral further. You saved lives." Mireia nodded. "It's my job," she said softly, though even she knew it was more than that. She had been trained, tested, and tempered, not just by drills and desert sands but by life itself. Every memory from Red Hollow, every lesson from Captain Cade, every fear she had faced alone had led to this moment.